I think for the longest time, we thought of weight issues as a lifestyle problem. Some people called it like a morality issue too, which is, I always thought a little bit weird. But for the longest time, we kind of pushed this treatment, so to speak, of lifestyle, like eat less, move more. And if that's not working, it means you're not doing enough. And that's been the messaging to society for so long. That was born out of just a misunderstanding of what obesity is. As you mentioned, obesity is truly a medical disease, just like that of high blood pressure, high cholesterol, other chronic diseases. And that isn't to say that the lifestyle choices we make doesn't affect obesity. It just means that there's multiple components to it, that you don't have full control over it just by dieting and exercising, that there's genetic issues, there's a hormonal factor to that also determines a person's weight and determines whether they're susceptible to having excess weight. And so because we really have been pushing as a society the wrong treatment for so long, this is why we have something like the obesity epidemic that just keeps getting worse and worse, right? So because of that, we recognize that a lot of how our body regulates weight is through all of those different hormones. And I think, many of my patients actually come back and say, well, duh, that's what they've been saying all the time. Since I'm an endocrinologist, I have some people coming in saying, something's wrong with my hormones. I keep gaining weight. I feel like I'm exercising and doing all of the quote unquote right things. But there's something's wrong with my hormones. Now we know that that's true. It is a hormonal issue. And so the medications that we've developed over the past 30 years based on that hormone research addresses that hormone problem. So now we're seeing a point where I like to kind of parallel it to high blood pressure, for example. Right? A lot of Americans have high blood pressure. We typically recommend low salt diet, lots of fruits and veggies, exercise, and all of that is great. But if you're doing all of that, or if you have limitations that prevent you from doing that to the best of your ability, then we usually recommend medications. Those medications will address the hormonal issues that are driving a person's blood pressure still to levels greater than our goals. Similarly with obesity, we still promote healthy eating and healthy lifestyles. But if you're doing all of that to the best of your ability and we're still not at our goal, then we recommend medications. So I think we're seeing a phase in our obesity epidemic now, which is hugely, I hate to use this word because everyone uses it. It is a game changer because we too have medications that really address that hormonal piece that we haven't been talking about, that hasn't been in the narrative for the past 50 years.
Yeah.
The problem now, Jill, I think, is that they exist out there in the world, but we just can't get it. Right? There's so many patients who really should be getting this medication, but aren't offered the medication, maybe because physicians who are not obesity medicine doctors don't know how to prescribe it. Maybe their medical education didn't include obesity medicine, which is very true. And so there are numbers out there where they've shown that there's only 1% of people eligible for obesity medicine medications are offered obesity medications. Just 1%. Wow. If we had that percentage in any other chronic disease, everyone would be so upset. So there's a nuance to that because the calories in, calories out is the correct answer to a different question, right? I think a lot of people ask, why do I have obesity or what causes obesity? And then the answer for all these years, the wrong answer, was calories in, calories out. Calories in, calories out is true as its own standalone statement, but it's really answering more of the question of what is my weight right now? Like just as a physical number, what is my weight right now today, February 15, is determined by maybe the average calorie in, calorie out over the past 1 week. That's kind of, it's more of a description. The calories in, calories out answers a description of weight, really. It doesn't really give much of an explanation as to why is my body continuing to gain weight? Why is my body predisposed to holding on to weight and making it so difficult to lose weight? If you think about it, this calories in, calories out is missing the whole black box of the actual body.
Right.
And that's, I think, what we have been missing this whole time, that we think we can just oversimplify it. And to a degree, if you eat small amounts, if you do really, really small amounts and you exercise a lot, yes, it can sort of make the black box, our body, kind of meaningless because you're doing such extremes. But what the research has been doing for the past 30 years was looking at that black box. Like, what happens when we have that calorie in? Where does it go? How does our body decide whether it goes into our fat storage, or does it go into our muscles or organs to be used up? How does it decide whether it goes one route or another? And also, how does that calorie affect our brain and our relationship to food? Does that calorie make us feel full? Does that calorie make us feel hungrier the next time? Does that calorie stimulate a craving for a different calorie? So I think those are the kind of black box questions that we've been sourcing out. And that is where you have the answer to what is causing my weight gain.
So I definitely encounter a lot of women who maybe their BMI is 27, 28, 29, or even 24, 25, and they want to lose weight, which is fine. Then it's really, I say it's about body composition.
Yeah.
You want to maybe build up some muscle and maybe burn some of that fat, but you may end up being the same weight. But let's set that aside. But even people who are in that overweight category, is that a medical condition, or do we look at that differently?
I would say the majority of data out there says that it is not in of itself, unless it's a kind of pre-obesity state. So in a way, it is a bit of a risk factor, a marker. Like if you have overweight at this point, then you are at a higher risk of developing obesity in the next 10 years than someone who has a normal BMI at that time. The problem is that we don't always know who are those people who are actually going to develop obesity and then the medical complications of obesity. There are people who just stay in this overweight category and they never actually develop obesity and they never actually develop medical complications. And that means if you're in the overweight category, you're fine. We don't need to treat that. We don't have to treat a number.
Yeah. And also there's the whole conversation around how BMI is not a very reliable tool for clinical, they use it for research and everything, but I mean, there are a lot of NFL football players who are in their 20s who have a BMI that I'm sure would be 28 or something like that, just because they're muscular,
It's so true. BMI doesn't account for that body composition. So there's a lot of limitations to BMI.
Yeah. But, I mean, it's something to think about. Okay. So
I'll say, Jill, though, that to a point of access, the one kind of population where I would be very cognizant of that overweight BMI category are certain ethnic populations. So like South Asian and East Asian in particular tend to start to develop medical complications of weight at those lower BMIs. Even if someone's still in the overweight range, they may already have high cholesterol, high blood pressure, diabetes, or prediabetes. And those are individuals where you definitely want to consider offering medications or offering some sort of more aggressive treatment. And so when you look at our, the Obesity Society guidelines, that was co-written with the AHA and ACC, the guidelines do recommend considering anti-obesity medications for people with a BMI of 27 plus a comorbidity, 27 or greater plus a comorbidity, not just those with a BMI of 30 and greater. So even the society guidelines put in that allowance, recognizing that what's more important here is that comorbidity piece. Right. If we already see a medical complication, then we do want to treat now. When you look at those BMI thresholds in some of the Asian guidelines, all of that is kind of kicked down about 2.5 points. So you do want to start recommending that at 24.5 if you have a comorbidity. I love that you bring up a 57-year-old menopausal woman, because that's really who we see. On average, our patients are 51 years old. The majority are women. They have class 1 obesity, so you have excess weight, but it's so excessive that you can't be exercising. Maybe you don't have knee pain yet, or any of those other limitations. And we always talk about medications, primarily because what they've done for most of their lives is the exercise and diet piece. And they've usually done that to the best of their ability.
Absolutely.
The first time they meet me is the first time someone's actually talking about how do we address those hormones. Right. And I think you spoke about it earlier, like thyroid, menopause, all of these things. I know people will hear about cortisol, estrogen, testosterone, and ask, like, are my hormones out of whack, and is this what's causing my weight problem? I can say for most of the people, I will say yes, there is a hormone issue. I just don't think it's thyroid, because we can check thyroid. Most of the time it's not thyroid. We can check testosterone. We can't really check estrogen, but I can say with my experience with menopausal women that it absolutely plays a role. We do know that estrogen actually suppresses appetite as a hormone. So when we lose that, or when we have fluctuations in estrogen around perimenopause, we do see fluctuations in how we eat, whether that be manifesting as cravings or changes in appetite level. But we do know that occurs. There's a lot of changes in menopause, actually. I could go through everything about that. But a lot of the hormones that control our weight are not the ones that we can check in the blood. That's the problem. Right? The problem is that those hormones work in the gut, or they work in the brain. So I can tell you that it is a hormonal issue, but I can't prove it to you because I can't check it in your brain. Right. But I think most people are very much reassured by that there is a hormone problem and that there are medications that can treat that hormone. I think that people who are naysayers think exactly that we're just going to give medications to everyone. Yeah. But it's not about that. It's more that we're trying to help that particular patient group where they have tried everything and they still haven't been able to get to their goal. And now they have another option to do on top of everything else that they're doing. Yeah. We still think lifestyle choices are important, right? But we also recognize that sometimes we don't have full control over those choices, right? If someone is working like 12 hours a day and they can't make a home cooked meal because they have to be up again in like 6 hours, then they may very well be eating a lot of takeout. And we recognize that that's part of their lifestyle right now, that they don't have control unless they quit their job. Right. That's just not financially feasible. There's a lot of just practical considerations here. And so we try to offer some other option to help mitigate the damage, so to speak, of what our current modern environment is imposing on us.
Yeah. It's very compassionate. And I think that's so important, because there's been so much, I think of it as abuse. I mean, not only from the medical establishment of sort of seeing this medical condition as a morality or a personality flaw or something, but also just from this multi-billion-dollar industry, which has grown up around, well, you're not thin and petite, so therefore, you have to take our magical pills or do this punishing workout regime, or, eat this highly restrictive diet, or do all three, actually, probably. Yeah. Right? And there's all this money being made basically preying upon people's insecurities and fear. And, it's really, it's abuse, and it's horrible. So I love what you're saying is it's compassion. It's saying, not everybody has the means or the capability to, work out an hour every day and make everything home cooked. Let's help those people too. They deserve to be healthy too.
Exactly.
I love that.
And I really hope in like 10 or 20 years in the future that we start seeing obesity differently. Right now, we define obesity on such a very physical and visible characteristic. As you say, no one else can tell that you have diabetes. But the way that we as a society and the medical community has defined obesity, it is a very visible disease, which has only added to that stigma. And that's, historically been driven by, BMI charts and all of that. But I really hope that in maybe 10 or 20 years, we really start seeing obesity as what I would call a hormonal disease. Some people call it a neurohormonal disease because it really has to do with how our brain processes calories. Does it make us feel full? Does it make us crave? Does it make us hungrier? And how our body decides what our weight set point is. And that shouldn't be visible, but that's really, I think, the crux of obesity as a disease.